Rockin' Royal, rockin' Navy, know y'all with me, let's get it, baby, Rockin' Royal, rockin' Navy, know you with me, let's get it, baby.
Welcome back to another edition of the Rockin' Royal Soccer Show, the podcast for all those who rock the Y on the pitch and beyond. I'm Sean Walker from KSL.com, your BYU beat writer and hashtag soccer guy, joined by, as always, my co-host for this hour, hashtag soccer girl, I guess. Yeah, we'll call you soccer girl. Former BYU women's soccer player Carla Swensen-Haslam, now in the broadcast booth with BYUtv, ESPN Plus, and other athletes, calling every game, or nearly every game, I'll say, of BYU women's soccer's 2024 season, including the season opener this Thursday against number 19 Wisconsin. We'll get to that in a minute. But Carla, how have you been? The season is officially upon us. I know technically it's kind of started, but there were 2 exhibition matches. They don't actually count in the standings. But the season is here. How excited does that make you this time of year?
Yeah, very excited. I think with college sports, you only have one season as opposed to the pros. And so that one season always feels like really big and really hyped up. And, college soccer is no different. You only play between, the first week of August when the season starts, and that's when training starts, up until, end of October. And then you go down to the tournament. And so as opposed to like professional games, which, I get to call those too. But as opposed to those, it's fun because it's such a short window and there's so many games and it's fun to be a part of and fun to see so many schools. BYU is my alma mater, coincidentally. And so it's cool for me to be able to, see how the team is doing year in and year out. But I'm excited for everything to get going and to, like I said, be a part of it.
Well, let's dive right into it a little bit because I mentioned we are through exhibition season. The games don't count in the standings, but I do think there were a lot of things to learn. This is the learning time. It's the end of preseason for every team in the country. And Carla, boy, there are a lot of lessons this BYU women's soccer team needs to learn after a 2-0 loss at Utah Valley to open exhibition play, and then a 1-0 loss against former Mountain West rival Wyoming. Both games, these BYU teams outshot their opponents 20-10 against the Wolverines, 15-13 against the Pokes, 9 shots on goal against that Wyoming side to just 4 for Wyoming. Wyoming converts the one that matters for a 1-0 win there. And I think that's maybe the biggest takeaway here is this team right now is struggling, not necessarily to get chances at times, but they're struggling to put them away. They're struggling to convert. It's the final third touch, that last touch. And you're a former goal scorer yourself. Are you concerned about this BYU offense right now after the results of these 2 exhibition games?
Yeah. I think the difficulty that BYU is having in their offense is, and you said it right, finishing in that final third, but it's really getting into the box, right? Because we look, those 14 shots against Wyoming, all of them are outside of the box. And any, pretty good Division I goalkeeper is going to read any shot coming out of the box. There may be some exceptions, right? Like if you have some crazy banger that's going to hit the top corner, then fine, like go for it. But there's very few players that can do that, and there's very few players that can do that consistently. And you can't be expecting your forwards to be consistently making long-range shots from outside of the box. And so it's interesting because you look at BYU shots, they only got into the box once as far as shot opportunities. And there were a couple of times there may have been a potential penalty kick. Bartel, who's the goalkeeper for Wyoming, I'm of the belief that she took out the BYU forward, should have been a penalty kick. But aside from that, there was only 1 or 2 times that BYU actually got into the box on their own. And I think that's problematic. I think that's problematic too on set pieces. There are set pieces that are going into the box and BYU is not connecting with them. Wyoming won almost every single set piece that went into the box off of a corner kick or, again, like a free kick coming off of a foul. And so if you're not in the box, you're not going to score goals. And so while it's important to look at the shot total, which, by the way, 14 for BYU is super low. Usually BYU is getting into the 20s for shots per game. So the fact that they're 14 is maybe the lowest I've ever seen. Even last year when they're playing some of the top-ranked teams in the country, and granted, the team last year was very different. I recognize that. But even against the top team of the country, they're still racking in 20 plus goals. And against teams that perhaps are lesser on the table, 30 plus goals or 30 plus shots, I mean. And so I think that's problematic for BYU that in an entire game they only get 14 shots just because that's not their style of play. And even more problematic that all 14 of them came from outside of the box. I just think you need to get in. Soccer statistics, if we look at just the numbers, and I spend a lot of time doing that as part of my job, soccer statistics tell you that over 80% of goals are scored from inside of the box. And so again, just using statistics, just using risk analysis, you would say that's our first step is we need to get into the box. And then as you said, as Coach Walker said, it comes down to finishing. Can you find it into the corners? But that's easier to do when you're in the box. It's easier to place it. It's easier to find where the goalkeeper's not if you are inside of the box getting your shots off. And that comes multiple ways. That comes from taking players on 1v1. BYU had a hard time doing that against Wyoming and UVU. And it comes against getting crosses in, which, a couple came in, but again, not a high volume. BYU is typically so used to getting a high volume of crosses into the box, and they just didn't see that against UVU and against Wyoming. And so for me, the concern is not as much does BYU have the talent to finish and put it away, but can they increase some of that volume of shots that are coming in from inside the box, whether they be through crosses and 1v1s? Perhaps it's because I'm the eternal optimist. We were talking about this earlier, Sean, but I think that those are changes BYU can make almost immediately within 1 or 2 games.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I don't think it's time to like press the panic button just because of a pair of results that didn't go your way in exhibition play. Like, again, like these games don't actually matter. They are there to tweak. They're there to learn. They're there to gauge where you need to fix things and where you need to change things and whatnot. This is a team that was ranked 3rd nationally by the United Soccer Coaches in the first preseason poll of the year. They're picked to win the Big 12. But I think a lot of those expectations are based off of last year's team just because that's what coaches know about this program. And obviously Jen Rockwood has a stellar reputation of reloading and not rebuilding, so a lot of that plays into it. But this team, like they lost a lot of talent front to back, but maybe in particular up front and in that midfield that I don't think has quite gotten all the way there. We talk about the kind of the deficiencies of having to replace our entire back line. I thought this back line, again, through 2 exhibition games against UVU and Wyoming, I thought for the most part they held up pretty well. I actually kind of like this pairing that Coach Rockwood went with of Tara Warner and Avery Frischknecht, 2 Springville High alums, by the way, there in that second game against Wyoming. I thought that worked pretty nicely, pretty well. And that kind of thing. I'm less concerned about the defense in some ways than I am just that inability to finish. And watching that game, like I did feel a lot of the same way about as you, Carla. I didn't feel like there were a ton of players that were really crashing the high scoring area, crashing the box, like just going straight at the keeper, that kind of a thing. And so I guess that kind of leads to something I've been thinking about all weekend is does this BYU team, are they equipped for that type of play? Because I know they've got 2 veteran returning attackers in Ali Fryer and Aaron Bailey, who scored a lot of goals last year, but neither one of them are necessarily that like physical center forward, like take on defenders, run right at them, kind of a thing. They're speedy players. They're shifty. EB she'll cross you over for days. And Ali Fryer is this like fiery, like light your hair on fire type of placement type sort of attacker. Is that just something that maybe this BYU team just doesn't have and they got to kind of figure out other ways to score goals? Or do you think these players, and maybe we can talk about some other attackers as well, do you think they have that ability to be sort of that box crasher, I guess, and convert those higher percentage shots into goals?
Yeah. So I think my answer to both of those questions is yes. I still think the team can. I'll start off first discussing Ali Fryer and Aaron Bailey. I think those 2 players can still be high resulting players. I think they do have to get the ball a lot more. We'll start with Ali Fryer. I think Coach Rockwood is still experimenting with Fryer. We started in the beginning of the first half against Wyoming. Fryer was placed in a withdrawn forward position, a midfield position. And for those, when I say withdrawn forward, that's actually a position that BYU created. So for the soccer enthusiasts listening to this, if you're like, what is a withdrawn forward? Like I said, that's a position that BYU created, and it's exactly what it sounds like. It's a midfielder who plays a little higher than the midfield line, but below that of the forwards, isn't going to be playing as a target, which is what Ali Fryer traditionally plays, is as a target, playing as the 9 in the center of the pitch. And so in the first half, Fryer played in that withdrawn position, and the hope was that she would be able to receive the ball more and create opportunities for herself and her teammates. She didn't get the ball a ton. And so in the second half, we saw adjustments made where Fryer was then placed in her traditional target as the 9. But her midfield had a hard time finding her. And so I do think it'll ultimately come down to, can you find Ali Fryer the ball frequently? Again, it all comes down to volume. Soccer really is just a volume numbers game. So I think if she can get the ball more, I do think we'll start to see more of her. Erin Bailey, I thought looked good against UVU. I think she had bright spots. Wyoming, I don't think I saw as much from her, but again, I do think it's a volume issue. I do think it comes down to how often is she getting the ball, and is she getting the ball in a good space? Because you can get her the ball, but if it's chest high surrounded by 4 players, she's not going to be able to make something magical happen to it. But if you can split the seam, or if you can find her feet deep in the attacking third, then she's going to have an opportunity to score. And I think that's something else that, perhaps we're getting too much into the soccer nuance, but we have to look at the quality of balls that people are receiving. Ali Fryer, when she received a ball in Wyoming, almost always had 2 players on her. Is there a better way that we can find her when she's not man-marked by 2? Is there a way we can find her to run onto balls? Is there a way we can find her when her back isn't to goal? And again, these are things that you start to learn and the chemistry starts to develop as the season goes on. And so perhaps that's why I'm not too worried about the attack just yet, because I do think the type of passes that will make it easy for your forwards to get the ball often and in advantageous positions, I think will come as the season progresses. Now, to answer your other question about are there other players that may step up? It's too early to tell at this point, but I do think, Sean, that other players will have to step up if this team wants to be successful in their conference play. And again, I'm looking purely at statistics, purely at numbers. But you look at the years where BYU won conferences or made deep runs into the NCAA tournament, and they always had more than 4 players averaging over 10 goals by the time they get to the NCAA tournaments. And last year was no different. You had 5 players with 10 plus goals going into the NCAA. And again, maybe last year's team isn't fair because it was such an incredible team. So maybe it's not fair to compare them to. But you'll find that in all NCAA teams, of teams that make it to the Final Four, they have multiple players over 20 points. So that includes goals and assists. And so the teams that are making it far and doing well are not those that have just some stellar, U.S. women's national team star. They are those that have multiple players that are putting in a lot of points. And BYU's always been pretty good at that, as evident by the fact that they put multiple players in the NWSL last year. But I think that'll be the biggest question for BYU is they can't just rely on Ali Fryer or Erin Bailey if they want to go far. From a purely statistical standpoint, they have to have other players that are going to be willing to step in and score some goals.
No, and I think that's the biggest point is Ali and Erin can't do everything. They need a little bit of help. They need a little bit of a boost. They need, even last year when you had that dynamic 3-headed attacking monster of Ali Erin and Ellie Walbrook, who unfortunately is out for the year with the torn ACL and whatnot. Like even in that circumstance, you still had a Rachel McCarthy who could come in and spell some time. You still had Olivia Wade-Katoa who could get forward and get on the ball really well.
10 plus goals last year, right?
Yeah, I mean,
like Jamie Shepherd, Olivia Katoa are playing in the midfield, and yet they still got 10 goals last year. So you're right.
Right.
And I didn't mean to interrupt you, Sean. I tell you before, interrupting is my love language. It's how I'm into this. But I agree with you. I think your midfielders have to become a scoring presence if you want to make a deep run.
Yeah, midfielders, and even just some bench options. I don't think there's necessarily a huge problem with those top 2 returning scorers, but you look at the other options that BYU has. I think there's also just, frankly, an experience and maybe a little bit of a chemistry issue right now, because you saw, for example, Coach Rockwood go to somebody like a Caroline Stringfellow off the bench. I thought Caroline showed some really good moments and whatnot, but the finishing wasn't all the way there. She's also only a sophomore and fairly recently returned from a mission, I believe.
Yeah.
So she's still trying to kind of build up there. Same with the Natty Gardner, who you saw a little bit of. Emma Hamberlin saw a ton of time in that Wyoming game. And I think she could be an option for kind of that role. She's also only a freshman. Right in there. I mean, you go down and further on down the list, one of the more experienced players that was coming on and you should be able to hopefully see kind of fill into that role is Mackenzie Vance, who just barely got to Provo, 3-4 months ago from UCLA. So she's also new to the system. She's new to her teammates. She's new to all of that. So I think a lot of this probably comes with time. And the unfortunate thing is BYU fans are probably going to need to learn a little bit of patience this season because of all of the turnover and all of the losses from a year ago, from an incredibly good team a year ago. A lot of these biggest issues probably just take time, and they may come with a little bit of trial and error, some harder lessons, maybe that certain players on this team aren't necessarily used to learning. But I think they will come. I think they can come. I certainly think they can come. I don't know if they'll come by Thursday, but let's use that awkward transition to kind of transition to that season opener at Southfield Thursday night. Number 19, Wisconsin coming to town, 7 p.m. Mountain Time kickoff. You can catch it live if you're not at Southfield on Big 12 Now on ESPN Plus with Greg Wrubell and my lovely co-host Carla Swensen-Haslam, as you can for most of the year. Carla, this is the third all-time meeting between BYU and Wisconsin, two programs that are remarkably similar in what they've done, I think. 24 NCAA tournament appearances apiece, 2 College Cup appearances apiece, national runner-up, each of them. Neither one of them's won a national title, I believe. Wisconsin kind of plays the role in the Big Ten right now where they're almost always, like, they're very consistently good, occasionally great kind of a thing. And I think that's sort of where BYU's been at as they move into the Big 12 as well. One of those sort of vacillating between good to great in a lot of years. So I think this game may tell us a lot about where BYU is this year, maybe compared to where they are traditionally, because it's a very good Wisconsin team. Again, they're ranked top 20 nationally by the coaches in the preseason poll. But what are you maybe looking to see out of this BYU team that maybe you didn't see in exhibition season? And how do you kind of feel? What's sort of your feel for this matchup, I guess?
Yeah.
Initially.
No, I think that's a great question. And you do a great job of kind of setting the context for this Wyoming team, because you're right. They are a team that are consistently good. You're always going to get a good game, regardless of what year it is. And you're right. Some years they've been far better than others. I think it's also important to note that their coach has been the coach for the team for decades, very similar to that of Jennifer Rockwood, in that it's been the same coach for BYU for what will be 30 years this year. And for Wisconsin, it's almost 30 years. And so you have two very historied programs playing each other. Wisconsin's good this year. I will say that. And like I said, consistently good, but I think they are very much in the running to win their conference, potentially. They weren't voted as a potential to win, but I wouldn't be surprised if they did. And like I said, I wouldn't be surprised if they end up making the tournament and doing well, winning the first couple of games. And so I do think this is going to be a difficult matchup on Thursday for the Cougs, especially coming off of the 2 losses. Talking to the coaches and talking to the teams, I feel like BYU's morale is still high, even amid the 2 losses. You're right, they're exhibition matches, and I think they're very much seeing UVU and Wyoming as exhibition matches, trying to put it behind them as these were good practice runs in preparation for Wisconsin. It helps that BYU is going to be at home. Playing at Southfield is always difficult to do, and it's quite a travel to be able to come from Madison. And so I think BYU has things to help them to their advantage. The disadvantage is they will be starting the season against a very, very talented Wisconsin team that's very attack-minded. Wisconsin's going to play a very direct style of soccer, and so BYU's defense is going to have to be prepared to play that sort of direct by keeping very tight and keeping their shape really tight. So not just the individual play, but as a team, we'll have to play tight so that they don't get split. Because again, that's how Wisconsin likes to play. It likes to play very direct. They like to split the curtains and just go right towards goal. And I think if BYU's defense can hold them to that, can play a very tight defense, then I think it'll actually be a pretty low scoring game. So if I had to put predictions on this, I have no idea. But if I had to put predictions on this, I think it'll be a low scoring game if BYU can keep their defense tight. Now, who wins? That's difficult. I think BYU has a fighting chance if they can increase their shot volume. But ultimately, that's, I think, what it is going to hinge on is can BYU get a lot of shots on goal? If they can, I think they win that game. If they cannot, I think Wisconsin pulls away with the W.
Yeah, I think low scoring is probably a pretty fair prediction in this one. Like there was, and again, UVU and Wyoming, all respect to those teams, but they're also not the level of Wisconsin. But I think this BYU team can take a little bit of solace from the fact that they held a score like Faith Weber to only one goal in that Utah Valley match. I think that is actually fairly impressive if you really think about it. I don't think they handled the physicality of Wyoming quite as well as they necessarily expected, but again, that's also a very good learning experience because if you don't think that teams in the Big 12, hi Texas Tech, hi TCU, Iowa State, a couple of others, if you don't think that those teams aren't going to be physical with BYU, well, you've got something else coming for you. And this is also a Wisconsin team that, yes, they play a very direct style of football. They like to get up the field. They like to run at defenses. They're also very physical. They've got defenders that know how to dig in and really just grind out turnovers, grind out just kind of unforced errors in a lot of ways, or I guess they force them, so I guess they're forced errors. But they know how to really dig in and kind of just grit it out before booting it up the field to some of their attacking players in a lot of ways. So I think if this BYU team really learned from their exhibition games, then this could be a close game. But I think low scoring is certainly a fair and an accurate prediction for what these two teams could be. This is a game that may be decided by just one or two goals in a lot of ways. And if BYU can get in the box and they can figure things out on that offensive end, again, they had chances last week. They had a lot of chances. They just couldn't finish any of them. If they can get in and finish some of those chances, then I think this maybe looks a little bit different from maybe what fans saw out of this BYU women's soccer team during those two exhibition games in a lot of ways.
Yeah, and something else that comes to my mind too as you're, discussing this, Sean. Wisconsin, along with their direct style of soccer, plays things very compact down the spine of the pitch. And for past BYU teams, that would have been ideal because BYU always loved to go down the wings and love to be able to use their defenders as wing players and those withdrawn forwards as wing players. That's something we're not seeing as much from this BYU squad, mostly because that style of soccer is something that usually needs to be learned at the college level. A lot of players don't learn that in their youth. And because there's so many young players or transfer players, perhaps they have to learn that. But I also think BYU's success on Thursday will be highly dependent on if they can stretch what is typically a very compact Wisconsin team down the middle, if they can pull them out a bit. Like I said, down the spine, you are going to see, red jerseys, or I guess they're the away team. So you're going to be seeing white Wisconsin jerseys down the spine, very, very tight. And if BYU can pull them out by playing out wide, forcing the Badgers to come out wide, then only then will I think BYU have space to actually make some of those chances. And perhaps we're getting too much into the nuance of soccer. But I think it's important to discuss because everything I'm describing, getting high volume of shots, getting inside the box, pulling defenses out wide, these are all tenets of BYU soccer, what they're traditionally known for and what has allowed them to get a lot of success. And so I don't think they have to reinvent the wheel. If those things have helped them, make it all to the way to the championship game in the past, then the hope should be to continue trying to do those things even with this brand new team.
Yeah, there's a style of play and there's a little bit of a Death Texas and Jennifer Rockwood feel to this BYU program, right? Like what they've done so far has been successful. And I think they have players that know what to do to be successful. It's just a matter of bringing the rest of the team along and actually kind of learning on the fly. Like you can know what to do mentally, tactically, schematically, like everything sort of up here in your head, right? Putting that in practice sometimes just takes a little bit of time. It takes a little bit of just that extra work, whether it's extra work in the training set, in the film room, or on the training pitch, or whatever it may be. But sometimes it just takes a little bit of time to take what you know and translate into what you can do.
Yeah.
Carla, we talked about her a decent amount, but I did want to end really quick before I let you go, and we get to that season opener again Thursday, 7 p.m. Mountain Time at Southfield against number 19 Wisconsin. You can catch it on ESPN Plus with my lovely co-host and Greg Rubella. Shout out to Greg, our mutual friend.
Shout out to Greg.
Yeah, always a shout out to Greg. We're gonna have to get him on this podcast one of these days. I think he's secretly a footy guy, and I think he could be. I think he could give some pretty good takes for us.
I think so too.
But let's wrap up. We've talked a decent amount about her, both for good and for could be better, we'll say. But shout out to Ali Fryer, all Big 12 preseason honors this year by league coaches. She was the only BYU player on the all Big 12 preseason list for a team that received most of the first place votes in the Big 12 preseason coaches poll. Read into that what you will or what you won't, whatnot, but Ali certainly well deserving. Former WCC all freshman honoree in her lone year in the conference there. She was all Big 12 second team last year. Started 25 to 26 matches, had 10 goals. There's that magic number again, right? 10 goals, 1 assist for 21 points on 60 total shots. I think Ali's going to be a key part of this team. This is just a program that probably needs to maybe figure out a little bit more how to get her the ball and how to get her the ball in the right situations for her to be, again, that double-digit goal scorer that could be vital for this BYU team to try to contend for another Big 12 title in a lot of ways. So shout out to Ali.
Yeah, no, and I think it's very well deserving. Like, if you were to ask me to put together a team, from the conference, I would include Ali Fryer on it. I think she played so well last year. She stayed all summer on campus, talking to Coach Rockwood, she told me she's as fit as ever. She's as strong as ever. And I think it shows. I think she just has to get the ball more. I think if you give her the ball, like, she will make magical things happen, but you have to get her the ball.
Yeah, 100%. So hashtag get Ali the ball. We'll start that official social media campaign. I know you're not a big social media person, Carla.
There's been a lot of hashtags in today's episode.
There have been a couple of hashtags. That's true. From hashtag soccer guy to hashtag soccer girl. And now hashtag get Ali the ball. I think that's probably one that BYU fans can rally around, that last one at least. Maybe not the first two as much. At least not the first one. But certainly that last one right there. So
yeah.
Let's wrap this up then. And until season opener this Thursday, again, Southfield against number 19 Wisconsin, 7 o'clock. You can catch that action on Big 12 Now on ESPN Plus with Greg Rubella and my lovely co-host Carla Swensen-Haslam. Thanks again for joining me, Carla. Really appreciate it. And we will talk to you guys next time on the pitch.
Let's get it, baby. Rockin' Royal, rockin' Navy. Know you with me. Let's get it, baby. We going long like a cougar tail. Defense hitting hard like some seashells. Getting to the green, I ain't talking kale. Boy, that team up north, man, but oh well. We getting jiggy with that boy Cosmo. We granting kids wishes like that boy Cosmo. They steady hating on us, but we who they watch though. The Pac-12 mad, but we still on top, bro. Jaron Holder, Cody X, that's a cool connect. Yeah, my team is kinda